How does a mother end up being pushed out of her own home by the person who promised to protect her daughter? What does a woman do when she discovers that the man sitting at her dinner table, eating the food she cooked, is also the one plotting to take everything she spent 42 years building? How far can you sacrifice your own dignity for the sake of keeping peace in your family before you stop recognizing the woman staring back at you in the mirror? I'm standing in my kitchen on a Thursday evening in November, and the terracotta walls that my husband Luis painted the year before he died are closing in on me. The smell of mole simmers on the stove, the same recipe my mother taught me when I was 16, the same dish I've made every week for longer than my daughter Carolina has been alive. The wooden table in the center of the room, solid oak that Luis and I picked out at an estate sale in 1983, is set for 5. My hands are shaking as I fold the napkins because I know what's coming. I can feel it in the air, thick and heavy, like the rain that's been threatening all afternoon, but hasn't fallen yet. My son-in-law, Marco, walks into the kitchen without knocking, which he never does anymore, just walks in like he owns the place. He's wearing one of those expensive suits, the kind with the thin lapels and the silk lining, and his shoes click against my tile floor with an authority that makes my stomach tighten. Carolina follows behind him, her eyes down, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. My 2 granddaughters, Sophia and Emma, trail in last, their faces glued to their phones, and they don't even look up when I say hello. "Dinner's almost ready," I tell them, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Just needs another 5 minutes." Marco doesn't respond. He pulls out a chair, my chair, the one at the head of the table where Luis used to sit, and he drops into it like he's settling into a throne. He loosens his tie and looks around the kitchen, with this expression I've come to know too well over the past 3 years. This look that says everything here is outdated, insufficient beneath him. "We need to talk, Carmen," he says, and he doesn't even wait for everyone to sit down. About this house, my heart drops into my stomach. I know what's coming because we've danced around this conversation for months now. Little comments here and there, suggestions that maybe I should think about downsizing, that maybe this big old house is too much for me to handle alone, that maybe it would be better for everyone if we consolidated, if we thought about the future, if we made some smart financial decisions while there was still time. "Marco, let's eat first," Carolina says quietly, but her voice has no strength in it, and Marco waves her off like she's a fly buzzing near his ear. "No, this has been put off long enough," he says. "Your mother needs to understand the reality of the situation." I'm still standing by the stove, wooden spoon in my hand, and I can feel the heat from the burner on my arm, but I'm frozen. Sophia and Emma have finally looked up from their phones, and I can see the discomfort on their faces, but they don't say anything. They're 14 and 12, old enough to understand that something bad is happening, but young enough to believe that adults will handle it, that someone will make it okay. "What reality?" I ask, and I hate how small my voice sounds. Marco leans back in the chair, and he folds his hands across his stomach like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "The reality that you're 73 years old, living alone in a 4-bedroom house that's falling apart, spending money on upkeep and utilities and property taxes that could be going towards something productive. The reality that Carolina and I have been carrying you financially for the past 2 years while you sit here playing house in a place that's worth at least $400,000, probably more if we fixed it up and sold it right." The words hit me like a slap. Carrying me financially. I open my mouth to speak, but nothing comes out at first because my throat has closed up and my eyes are burning and I can feel 42 years of memories pressing against my chest, threatening to crack me open right here in front of everyone. "I'm not playing house," I finally managed to say. "This is my house. Luis and I bought this house in 1983. We raised Carolina here. We paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. And Luis has been dead for 4 years, Marco says, and his voice is so casual, so matter-of-fact, that I actually take a step backward. "You've been living off his pension and Social Security, and it's not enough. You know it's not enough. We've been covering your shortfalls, paying your bills when you come up short, and quite frankly, Carmen, it's not sustainable anymore." "Marco, stop," Carolina says. But again, there's no force behind it, and Marco just keeps going. "Do you know how much credit card debt you're carrying right now? Do you have any idea what your heating bill was last winter? You're drowning, and you're too proud or too stubborn to admit it, and meanwhile, Carolina and I are trying to plan for our future, trying to save for the girls' college, trying to build something, and we're being dragged down by your refusal to face facts. I look at my daughter, and she won't meet my eyes. She's staring at the table, at the grain in the wood, and I realize in that moment that they've talked about this, that this isn't Marco going rogue, that Carolina has been part of these conversations, these calculations, these plans that involve my house, my home, my life. You want me to sell the house, I say, and it's not a question. We want you to be realistic, Marco says. We want you to stop being a burden. That word hangs in the air, burden. I can see it land on Sophia and Emma, and their faces change, their eyes go wide, and Sophia actually says, "Dad," in this shocked whisper, but Marco doesn't take it back. "You heard me," he says, and now he's standing up, and he's walking toward me, and I'm still holding the wooden spoon like it's a weapon or a shield or something that can protect me from what's happening. "You're a burden, Carmen. An old woman clinging to a house you can't afford, too stubborn to admit that the world has moved on without you. If you had any sense, any gratitude for everything Carolina and I have done for you, you'd sell this place, split the money with us so we can actually use it for something that matters, and you'd move into one of those nice little senior apartments where you don't have to worry about yard work or repairs or any of the things that are clearly too much for you. Get out," I hear myself say, and my voice doesn't sound small anymore. "Get out of my house." Marco laughs. He actually laughs, and it's a cold sound, empty and mean. "Your house? You can't even afford your house. Without us, you'd have lost it already. The bank doesn't care about your memories, Carmen. The bank cares about payments, and you can't make them." I said, "Get out." "Fine," Marco says, and he turns to Carolina and the girls. "Come on, let's go get real food somewhere. I'm done eating charity dinners in this dump anyway." And then he says it. He's walking toward the door, and he turns back, and he looks at me with this expression of pure contempt, and he says, "Useless old woman." The door slams. Carolina doesn't even look at me as she follows him out. The girls hesitate for just a second, and I can see Sophia start to say something, but then Emma tugs her arm, and they're gone too, and I'm standing alone in my kitchen with the mole burning on the stove, and the table set for 5 people who aren't coming back. I turn off the burner. I stand there in the silence, and I can hear the clock ticking on the wall, the same clock that's been there for 30 years, and I can hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven, and I can hear the sound of my heart breaking, which isn't really a sound at all, but feels like one, feels like something inside me cracking clean in two. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I don't sleep that night. I sit at the kitchen table until the sky starts to lighten in the east, and I look around at this house that Marco called a dump, this house that he thinks I'm too useless to deserve, the terracotta walls that Luis painted, the tile floor we put in ourselves, me mixing grout while Luis laid each piece, working through an entire summer weekend by weekend until it was done, the wooden cabinets that Luis built by hand, sanding and staining until they gleamed. The window over the sink where I've stood for 42 years washing dishes and watching the seasons change in the backyard, watching Carolina learn to ride her bike on that cracked concrete patio, watching Luis plant tomatoes and peppers and herbs in the garden that's now overgrown with weeds because I can't bend down the way I used to. This house holds my whole life. Luis proposed to me in the living room, got down on one knee on a Saturday morning in February 1982, and we were married that summer. We brought Carolina home from the hospital to this house, carried her through that front door wrapped in a yellow blanket, and Luis cried because he was so happy, because he couldn't believe we'd made this perfect little person. We celebrated every birthday here, every Christmas, every graduation. We buried my mother from this house, and we buried Luis from this house, and both times the neighbors filled these rooms with food and flowers and quiet company, and the walls absorbed all of that grief and love and kept standing. Luis died in our bedroom upstairs, in the bed we'd shared for 33 years. He had a heart attack on a Tuesday morning, just after dawn, and I was lying next to him when it happened. I felt him go still, felt the moment his breath stopped, and I held him, and I knew that my life was split into before and the after was going to be so much harder than I could imagine. For the first 2 years, I managed. Luis had a small pension from his 30 years at the warehouse, And I had his Social Security, and I had my own Social Security from the years I worked as a teacher's aide before Carolina was born. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I paid the property taxes, kept the utilities on, bought groceries, fixed things when they broke. I was careful. I didn't waste money. I didn't travel or buy new clothes or do anything extravagant. I just lived in my house and tried to figure out who I was without Luis, and that was hard enough without worrying about money. But then things started breaking in ways I couldn't fix myself. The water heater went out in the winter of the second year, and that was $1,200. The roof started leaking the following spring, and that was $3,000. The furnace stopped working that next winter, and that was another $2,500. I used my credit card for the water heater, thinking I'd pay it off quickly, but then the roof and the furnace came one after another, and suddenly I was carrying a balance, and the interest was eating into my checks, and I was coming up short on the property taxes. That's when Marco started helping. He showed up one day with Carolina, and he sat at this table, and he said, "Carmen, we know things have been tight, and we want to help. We're family." He wrote me a check for $1,500, enough to cover what I was short on the taxes, and I cried because I was so grateful, so relieved that I wasn't going to lose the house over a bill I couldn't quite cover. But after that, the help came with commentary. Every time I needed something, every time I had to ask, Marco made sure I knew it was costing them. He'd sigh and shake his head and say things like, "I don't know how you got yourself into this situation," or "We really can't keep doing this," or "You need to think about what's realistic at your age." And Carolina would stand beside him and nod and say, "He's right, Mom. You need to be practical, realistic, sustainable." These words became weapons used against me in my own home, in conversations that always ended with some version of the same suggestion. Sell the house, take the money, find somewhere cheaper, somewhere smaller, somewhere that won't be such a drain on everyone. I started to believe them. I started to think maybe I was being stubborn, selfish even, holding on to this house when it was clearly too much for me. Maybe I was a burden. Maybe useless wasn't so far from the truth. But sitting here in the gray light of Friday morning, my eyes swollen from crying, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that's gone cold, I'm thinking about something Luis told me about 3 weeks before he died. We were lying in bed, and he wasn't feeling well, and he knew something was wrong, even though he wouldn't admit it. He took my hand and he said, "Carmen, promise me you'll keep the house. No matter what anyone says, no matter how hard it gets, keep the house. It's yours. Don't let anyone take it from you." I promised him. I said, "I promise." And he squeezed my hand and fell asleep, and 3 weeks later he was gone. I broke my promise. I let Marco and Carolina convince me that keeping my promise to Luis was foolish, that holding on to this house was about pride instead of love, that I needed to let go of the past and be realistic about the future. I let them make me feel small and useless and like a burden. But that night, something shifted. That night, when Marco called me a useless old woman in my own kitchen and walked out with my daughter and granddaughters, something inside me that had been bent and compressed and ready to break finally straightened back up. I pick up my phone. It's 6 in the morning, too early to call anyone, but I don't care. I scroll through my contacts until I find the name I'm looking for, Patricia Morales. Patricia was Luis's cousin, older than both of us, a lawyer who handled real estate and wills and estate planning. She'd called me after Luis died, asked if I needed help with anything, and I'd said no, because Marco had said he'd handle everything, that I didn't need to spend money on a lawyer when it was all straightforward. I text Patricia, "Can you see me today? It's urgent." The response comes back in less than 5 minutes. "My office, 10 o'clock. I'll make time." The rest of the morning crawls by. I shower. I put on the navy blue dress I wore to Luis's funeral, the one that makes me look serious and pulled together. I find the folder where I keep all my important papers, the deed to the house, the copies of Luis's will, the pension paperwork, the bank statements, the credit card bills, everything I can think of that might matter. I put it all in a canvas bag, and at 9:30 I get in my car, a 2007 Honda Civic that's older than my granddaughter's but still runs fine, and I drive across town to Patricia's office. The building is glass and steel, modern and cold, nothing like the warm, lived-in spaces I'm used to. The lobby has marble floors and a security desk and a directory that lists Patricia's firm on the 11th floor. I take the elevator up, and my stomach is churning because I don't know what I'm doing here. Don't know what I'm hoping Patricia can tell me, but I know I can't go back to that kitchen table and wait for Marco to decide when and how I lose my home. Patricia's office is all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city that makes me feel dizzy. She comes around her desk when I walk in, and she hugs me hard, and she smells like expensive perfume and coffee, and she says, "Carmen, mi amor, what's happened?" I tell her everything. I tell her about the broken water heater and the leaking roof and the credit card debt that I can't seem to get ahead of. I tell her about Marco's checks and his comments and his suggestions that I sell the house. I tell her about last night, about the words he used, about the way Carolina wouldn't look at me, about standing alone in my kitchen after they left. When I finish, Patricia is quiet for a long moment. Then she says, "Do you have copies of the checks Marco gave you? Bank statements showing the deposits?" I pull out my folder and hand over my bank statements from the past 2 years. Patricia spreads them out on her desk and studies them, her finger tracing lines across the paper, and I watch her face change. Her jaw tightens, her eyes narrow. "Carmen," she says slowly, "how much do you think Marco has given you?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe 6,000 or 7,000 over the past 2 years. Patricia shakes her head. "According to your statements, you've received exactly 2 deposits from Marco. One for $1,500 2 years ago and one for $800 last year. That's it. $2,300 total." I stare at her. "But he said he'd been covering my shortfalls, paying my bills. If he was, it's not showing up in your accounts. What about credit card payments? Has he paid those directly?" "I don't think so. I mean, I pay them. I make the minimum payment every month from my checking account." Patricia pulls over a legal pad and starts making notes. "Okay. Walk me through your monthly income and expenses. Every dollar." We spend the next hour going through my finances, and it's humiliating at first, laying bare every bill and every shortage. But Patricia doesn't judge. She just writes numbers in neat columns, and when we're done, she sits back and looks at the totals. "Carmen, you're not drowning. You're treading water, which isn't ideal, but you're not in crisis. Your income covers your basic expenses. The credit card debt is the problem, but it's manageable. We can work with the card company, get the interest rate reduced, set up a payment plan. You could have this paid off in 2 years, maybe less." But Marco said, Marco lied, or at the very least, he dramatically exaggerated to make you feel helpless and dependent. The words land like stones in my chest. Lied, exaggerated, made me feel helpless. Why would he do that? I ask, even though somewhere deep down, I already know the answer. "Because," Patricia says, and her voice is gentle but firm, "he wants your house, and the easiest way to get it is to convince you that you can't afford to keep it, that selling is your only option, and that he and Carolina are doing you a favor by taking it off your hands. But they're my family." Yes, and sometimes family can be the most dangerous people in your life when money is involved. I think about Marco's expensive suits, his new car, the vacation he and Carolina took to Mexico last summer, the private school tuition for Sophia and Emma. I think about how he always talks about building wealth, about investments and property and financial planning, and I realize that when he looks at my house, he doesn't see my home. He sees $400,000 that he thinks should be his. What do I do? I ask Patricia, and I hate the fear in my voice, but it's there, real and raw. First, we protect your assets. You need to make sure that house is completely and legally yours, with no ambiguity. Then we look at your will. Who's listed as your beneficiary? Carolina. Everything goes to Carolina. We might want to rethink that, or at the very least, add some conditions and protections. Make sure that if something happens to you, the house and your assets can't be touched by Marco. She's my daughter. I know. But right now, your daughter is married to a man who called you a useless old woman and is plotting to take your home. We need to make sure that even if Carolina is your heir, Marco can't access or control your estate. The words feel like betrayal, like I'm turning against my own child. But I think about Carolina's face last night, the way she wouldn't look at me, the way she followed Marco out the door without a word. And I realized that maybe Carolina turned against me first. Maybe she chose Marco and his plans over her mother. And that's a kind of betrayal, too. "There's something else you should know," Patricia says. She reaches into a drawer and pulls out an envelope. "Luis gave this to me about a month before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you got it, but only if you needed it. I think you need it now. She hands me the envelope. It's sealed, and my name is written on the front in Luis's handwriting, and my hands are shaking so hard I can barely open it. Inside is a letter, 2 pages in Luis's careful script, and a document that looks legal and official. "My dearest Carmen," the letter begins, and I have to stop because my vision is blurring with tears. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and it means you're in trouble. I'm so sorry I'm not there to protect you, but I'm doing the best I can from wherever I am now." The letter explains that in the last months of his life, Luis suspected that Marco was not what he seemed. He'd overheard conversations, noticed the way Marco looked at the house, the way he talked about financial planning and smart investments, and Luis had gotten worried. So he'd gone to Patricia and set up a trust, something complicated that I don't fully understand even as I'm reading about it. But the bottom line is this: the house doesn't just belong to me outright. It's held in a trust that names me as the beneficiary for life, meaning I can live in it and control it as long as I'm alive. But when I die, it goes directly to Sophia and Emma, my granddaughters, not to Carolina, and definitely not to Marco. It can't be sold or mortgaged or touched without my explicit consent. And even then, there are protections in place to make sure I'm not being coerced or manipulated. "I did this because I love you," Luis writes, "because this house is more than wood and walls. It's your security, your safety, your proof that you built something real in this world. Don't let anyone take that from you. Don't let anyone make you feel small or useless. You are strong, Carmen. You are worth everything." I'm crying so hard, I can barely breathe. Patricia comes around the desk and puts her hand on my shoulder, and she doesn't say anything, just lets me cry until I'm empty. "He protected you," Patricia finally says. "Even after he was gone, he made sure you'd be safe. Marco doesn't know about this." "No, and he's not going to like it when he finds out. What do I do now?" Patricia smiles, and it's not a kind smile. It's the smile of someone who's about to go to war. "Now, we set some boundaries. We make it very clear that your house is off the table, that any conversation about selling or downsizing is over, and that Marco needs to back off. And if he doesn't, we have the legal tools to make him." I leave Patricia's office 3 hours later with a plan, with copies of all my documents, with the trust paperwork that proves my house is protected, and with something I haven't felt in months: hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of someone waiting to be rescued, but the solid, grounded hope of someone who knows she has the power to rescue herself. But I also leave with questions. How do I face Carolina after this? How do I look at my own daughter and tell her that I don't trust her anymore, that her husband is manipulating both of us, that I'm protecting my home from them? How do I explain that I'm choosing my own dignity over keeping the peace? How do I survive the war that's about to start in my own family? And underneath it all, the biggest question: how did it come to this? How did the little girl I raised, the daughter I loved more than my own life, become someone who would stand by while her husband tried to steal her mother's home? The rain that's been threatening since yesterday finally starts to fall as I drive home. Fat drops that blur the windshield and turn the streets slick. I pull into my driveway, and I sit in the car for a long moment, looking at my house. The terracotta walls need a fresh coat of paint. The gutters are sagging in one corner. The lawn is overgrown because I haven't had the energy to mow it. Marco is right about one thing. The house needs work, needs care, needs someone with the strength and money to maintain it. But it's mine. Luis gave it to me, protected it from me, and I'm not going to let anyone take it, not even my own daughter. I get out of the car and walk to the front door, and I put my key in the lock, and I step inside. And the house feels different now. It doesn't feel like a trap or a burden. It feels like a fortress, like the place I'll make my stand. My phone rings. It's Carolina. I let it go to voicemail. She calls again. Voicemail again. On the third call, I answer. "Mom?" Her voice is tentative, uncertain. "Mom, I'm so sorry about last night. Marco was out of line. He shouldn't have said those things." "No, he shouldn't have." There's a long silence. "Can we come over? Can we talk? Is Marco coming?" Another silence, longer this time. "He wants to apologize." "Tell Marco I don't want his apology. Tell Marco I want him to stay away from my house and stop planning my life like I'm already dead, and he's in charge of my estate." "Mom, that's not fair. We're trying to help you." "No, you're trying to help yourselves, and I'm done being grateful for it." I hang up before she can respond. My hands are shaking again, but this time it's not from fear. It's from anger, from the adrenaline of finally standing up for myself. The phone rings again immediately. I send it to voicemail. A text comes through. "Mom, please, we need to talk. This is important." I text back, "You're right, it is important. Come over tomorrow at 2. Just you, not Marco. We need to have a real conversation, and I need you to actually listen to me for once." The reply takes a few minutes. "Okay, tomorrow at 2. I spend the rest of that Friday putting my house in order, literally and figuratively. I clean the kitchen, scrubbing away the burned mole from last night's disaster. I vacuum the living room and dust the furniture and water the half-dead plants in the windows. I go through my papers again, organizing everything into folders, making sure I understand every bill, every statement, every piece of my financial life. I want to know exactly where I stand, what I can afford, what I need to change. At some point, I realize I'm hungry. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. I make myself a sandwich, turkey and cheese on bread that's a little stale, and I sit at the kitchen table and eat it slowly, tasting every bite, and it feels like the first real meal I've had in months. That night, I sleep better than I have in years. I sleep in the bed I shared with Luis, and I dream about him. And in the dream, he's young again, and we're walking through the house on the day we first saw it, when it was empty and full of possibility, and he's holding my hand and saying, "This is it, Carmen. This is where we build our life." And I wake up with tears on my face, but also with a clarity I haven't felt since he died. Saturday morning arrives cold and bright. I make coffee and sit at the kitchen table and wait for 2 o'clock, and the hours crawl by like they're moving through mud. At exactly 2, Carolina's car pulls into the driveway. I watch from the window as she gets out, alone like I asked, and she stands there for a moment, looking at the house like she's never seen it before, and I wonder what she's thinking. Does she see her childhood? Does she see the place where she learned to walk and talk and read? Or does she see $400,000 and a problem that needs to be solved? She knocks on the door instead of just walking in, and that small gesture feels like a concession, like an acknowledgement that maybe she doesn't have automatic access to this space anymore. I let her in. We sit at the kitchen table, the same table where Marco called me useless, and there's a tension between us that feels like broken glass, sharp and dangerous. "Mom," Carolina starts, but I hold up my hand. "No, I need to talk first, and I need you to listen. Really listen." She nods, and she looks so much like she did when she was a little girl getting scolded for something she didn't quite understand was wrong that my heart hurts. "I know you think Marco and you have been helping me," I say. "I know you think I'm too old or too stubborn to see that I can't afford this house. But you're wrong. I can afford this house. Patricia went through my finances with me, and while it's tight, I'm not drowning. I'm managing. The debt I have is manageable, and I have a plan to pay it off." "Patricia?" Carolina looks confused. "Luis's cousin." "My lawyer, yes." "Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since yesterday. Since I realized that my own daughter and son-in-law are plotting to take my home from me." Carolina's face goes pale. "That's not what we're doing." "Then what are you doing, Carolina? Tell me what last night was about. Tell me why Marco thinks he has the right to call me useless in my own kitchen, to talk about my house like it's his asset to liquidate." He was frustrated. "We've been stressed about money, and he just what? He just decided that his stress gives him permission to abuse me? That your stress means you get to erase 42 years of my life and sell off the house your father and I built together? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Make me understand how the daughter I raised, who grew up in this house, who brought her babies home to this house, can look at me and think that pushing me out is anything other than betrayal." Carolina is crying now, and part of me wants to reach across the table and comfort her like I always have, but I don't. I sit still and I wait. "We're broke," she finally says. "Marco's business isn't doing well. We're behind on the mortgage. The girls' school sent us a letter saying if we don't pay the tuition we owe, they'll be kicked out. We have credit card debt we can't pay down. We're drowning, Mom, and we thought if you could just take my house and use the money to fix your problems." "It's not taking. We're family. We thought it would be helping you too, getting you into a situation you could manage and helping us at the same time, without asking me, without giving me a choice, just manipulating me until I felt so worthless and incapable that I'd agree to whatever you wanted. That wasn't the plan. But that's what happened. Carolina wipes her eyes with the back of her hand, and she looks at me, and I can see her trying to decide whether to keep defending Marco or to finally admit the truth. He said it would be easy, she whispers. He said you were already struggling, that you'd be relieved if we took over, that we could sell the house and split the money and everyone would be better off. He said it was the smart thing to do, and you believed him. I didn't know what else to do. He's my husband. We're supposed to be a team. When he said we needed to do this, I thought he was thinking about our family, about making sure we could survive. What about me? I'm your family too. I know. God, Mom, I know. And I'm so sorry. When he said those things to you Thursday night, I wanted to die. I wanted to tell him to stop, to defend you, but I was so scared that if I did, he'd leave. And then where would I be? A single mother with 2 kids and no money and no way to support them. So you chose him over me. I chose my marriage. I chose my kids' stability. I chose not to blow up my entire life by blowing up mine. The silence that follows is heavy, and I let it sit there between us because this is the moment where Carolina has to decide who she is. Is she the woman who will keep sacrificing her mother to keep her husband happy? Or is she the woman who will finally stand up and admit that what's been happening here is wrong? What do you want me to do? Carolina finally asks, and her voice is so small, so broken. I want you to tell Marco that my house is off the table, that we're not having any more conversations about me selling or downsizing or anything else, that this is my home, and it's going to stay my home until I die. He's not going to like that. I don't care what Marco likes. This isn't his decision to make. But if I tell him that, if I go against him on this, he's going to be furious. Then let him be furious. You're a grown woman, Carolina. You're not required to agree with everything your husband says, especially when what he's saying is cruel and wrong. You don't understand what it's like. The pressure, the constant fighting about money, the way he looks at me when I don't support him. I understand more than you think. Your father and I had hard times too, but we never turned on each other or on anyone else to solve our problems. We worked together. We made sacrifices. We figured it out. I'm not as strong as you. Yes, you are. You just forgot. Carolina stands up and walks to the window, and she looks out at the backyard, at the overgrown garden and the cracked patio. And I know she's seeing her childhood, seeing the place where she learned to ride her bike and where Luis pushed her on the swing set that's long gone, and where we had birthday parties and barbecues and ordinary afternoons that turned into the foundation of a life. There's something you should know, I say. Your father set up a trust before he died. The house isn't just mine, it's protected. When I die, it goes directly to Sophia and Emma. Marco can't touch it. Even you can't sell it or mortgage it without very specific conditions being met. Dad made sure of it because he was worried that something like this might happen. Carolina turns around, and her face is a mixture of shock and something that might be relief. Dad knew. He suspected. He didn't know how bad it would get, but he knew enough to protect me, to protect us. Does Marco know? Not yet, but he's going to. He's going to lose his mind. Probably. But that's not your problem or mine. His financial situation is his to fix, not ours. And if he can't handle that, if he needs to be angry at someone, he can be angry at me. I can take it, but you need to decide, Carolina. Are you going to keep enabling him, keep letting him treat me like this, like an obstacle to be removed? Or are you going to remember who you are and where you came from? She's crying again, and this time, I do reach across the space between us, and I take her hand, and I squeeze it. I love you, I tell her. I will always love you. But I'm not going to let you or Marco destroy me. I'm not going to apologize for being alive, for taking up space, for wanting to live in my own home with dignity. If that makes me inconvenient or difficult, then so be it. Carolina grips my hand so hard it hurts. I don't want to lose you. Then don't choose Marco over me. Don't choose money over family. Don't choose convenience over what's right. We sit like that for a long time, holding hands across the table, and I don't know if I've gotten through to her or if this is just a moment of sentimentality that will evaporate as soon as she goes home and Marco starts in on her again. But I've said what I needed to say, and now it's up to her to decide what kind of person she wants to be. She leaves around 4, and she hugs me at the door, and she says, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." And I hug her back, and I say, "I know. Now show me you mean it." That night, my phone blows up. Marco calls 6 times in 2 hours. He leaves voicemails that start out angry and escalate to furious. What did you tell Carolina? What lies are you spreading? You're trying to destroy our marriage. You're manipulating her. This is exactly the kind of selfish, toxic behavior that proves you're not capable of making good decisions. I don't respond. I just save the voicemails, every one of them, because Patricia told me to document everything. And these messages are Marco showing exactly who he is when he doesn't get his way. The texts come next. We need to talk. You're being unreasonable. Think about the girls. Think about Carolina's happiness. You're tearing this family apart. Finally, around 10 at night, a text that makes my blood run cold. Fine. If you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball. You're going to regret this. I forward all of it to Patricia. Her response is immediate. Document everything, don't engage, and be prepared. He's going to escalate. Sunday passes in tense silence. Carolina doesn't call or text. The girls don't either, which hurts more than I want to admit. I keep myself busy with small tasks, organizing closets, fixing a loose cabinet hinge, watering plants, anything to keep my hands occupied and my mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Monday morning, Patricia calls. We have a problem. Marco filed for a restraining order against you. For a moment, I can't process what she's saying. What? On what grounds? He's claiming you threatened him and Carolina, that you're emotionally unstable, that you're harassing them and making wild accusations. It's complete bullshit, and it's not going to hold up, but we need to respond. There's a hearing scheduled for Friday. He's trying to make me look crazy. Yes, and he's trying to isolate you from Carolina and the girls. If he can get a restraining order, he can claim you're dangerous, that you're the problem, and he can use that to pressure Carolina into cutting you off completely. Can he do that? He can try. But we have his voicemails, his texts, his history of financial manipulation. We have your documentation. We have the trust. He's the one who's going to look bad here, not you. But Carmen, I need you to be strong. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. The week that follows is the longest of my life. I don't hear from Carolina. I send her a text on Wednesday. I love you. I hope you and the girls are okay. I'm here when you're ready to talk. No response. I clean my house obsessively. I go through all my papers again, making sure everything is in order. I rehearse what I'll say at the hearing, how I'll explain what's been happening, how I'll prove that I'm not the villain in this story. Thursday night, I can't sleep. I lie in bed and listen to the house settle, all the familiar creaks and groans, and I think about Luis. I think about the promise I made him, and I think about how close I came to breaking it, to letting Marco convince me that I was too useless to deserve this home. I'm keeping my promise, I whisper into the dark. I'm fighting for us, for everything we built. Friday morning arrives, cold and gray. I put on my navy blue dress again, the one I wore to Patricia's office, the one that makes me look serious and capable. I drive to the courthouse, and Patricia meets me in the lobby, and she squeezes my arm and says, "You've got this. Just tell the truth." The courtroom is smaller than I expected. Just a judge's bench and a table for each side and a few rows of seats for observers. Marco and Carolina are already there, sitting with their lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit who looks like he graduated law school last week. Marco won't look at me, but Carolina does, and her eyes are red and puffy, and she looks like she hasn't slept in days. The hearing begins, and Marco's lawyer goes first. He paints a picture of me as an unstable old woman, clinging to the past, making baseless accusations, harassing his clients with demands and threats. He plays a voicemail I left for Carolina on Tuesday, asking her to call me, and he makes it sound sinister, like I'm stalking her. Then it's Patricia's turn. She pulls out the voicemails Marco left for me, the texts, the documentation of the financial manipulation, the history of verbal abuse. She plays Marco's messages, and in the silence of the courtroom, his voice sounds exactly like what it is: cruel, controlling, threatening. "Your Honor," Patricia says, "this is not a case of a grandmother harassing her family. This is a case of financial elder abuse. Mr. Martinez has spent the past 2 years systematically undermining my client's confidence, convincing her that she's incapable of managing her own life, pressuring her to sell her home so that he can access the proceeds to cover his own debts. When Mrs. Santos refused and established legal protections for her assets, Mr. Martinez retaliated by filing this frivolous restraining order in an attempt to isolate her from her daughter and grandchildren. The judge listens to everything, reviews all the documents, and then asks Marco directly, "Mr. Martinez, can you provide any documentation of the financial support you claim to have given Mrs. Santos?" Marco hesitates. "We paid for things directly. Repairs, bills. It wasn't always check or cash. Do you have receipts? Bank statements? Anything showing these payments?" Another hesitation. "Not with me. Mrs. Santos has provided 2 years of bank statements showing exactly 2 deposits from you, totaling $2,300. Are you claiming there were other payments beyond that? We helped in other ways. Emotional support, time, being there for her. That's not financial support, Mr. Martinez. And emotional support doesn't give you the right to call someone a useless old woman in their own home, does it?" Marco's face goes red. That was taken out of context. Was it? Because I've listened to your voicemails to Mrs. Santos from this past week, and I'm hearing a pattern of verbally abusive behavior. I'm also seeing evidence that you have significant financial problems of your own, including mortgage default and unpaid tuition, which gives you a clear motive for wanting access to Mrs. Santos's home equity. Your Honor, that's not... I'm denying your request for a restraining order, the judge interrupts. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to cease all contact with Mrs. Santos unless she initiates it. You are not to discuss her finances, her property, or her personal affairs with anyone. If I see you back in my courtroom with another frivolous filing, I'll hold you in contempt. Do you understand?" Marco nods stiffly. "Mrs. Santos," the judge says, turning to me, "I'm sorry you've had to deal with this situation. You have every right to live in your home and manage your own affairs without harassment. If Mr. Martinez violates this order, you contact the court immediately." "Thank you, Your Honor," I manage to say, and my voice is steady even though inside I'm shaking. The hearing ends. Patricia and I walk out into the hallway, and she's smiling, and she says, "That went better than I could have hoped." But I'm not looking at Patricia. I'm looking at Carolina, who's standing by the elevator with tears streaming down her face while Marco argues with his lawyer, and I can see the moment when something breaks in her, when she finally sees her husband for what he is. She walks over to me. Marco calls after her, "Carolina, don't," but she ignores him. "Mom," she says, and her voice is raw. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have protected you. I should have seen what he was doing." I pull her into a hug, and she sobs against my shoulder, and I hold her the way I held her when she was a little girl having a nightmare, and I say, "It's okay. You see it now. That's what matters." "I'm leaving him," she whispers. "I'm taking the girls and leaving him. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can't stay with someone who would do this to you. You'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Together." Marco is standing 20 feet away, watching us, and the look on his face is pure rage. But there's something else there too. Fear. He just lost his golden ticket, his access to $400,000 that he needed to save himself, and now he's going to have to face his debts and his failures on his own. As Carolina and I walk toward the exit, I hear him call out, "You'll regret this, both of you." But we don't stop. We don't look back. We just keep walking. The next morning, Saturday, Carolina and the girls show up at my house with suitcases. Marco tried to stop them from leaving, she tells me, but she'd already called a friend who came over with her husband, and they'd helped pack and load the car while Marco yelled threats from the driveway. "We can't stay long," Carolina says. "I need to find an apartment, figure out a job, get the girls enrolled in a new school. But just for a few days, while I get my bearings. Is it okay if we stay here? This is your home," I tell her. "It's always been your home. Stay as long as you need." Over the next few weeks, the house fills with life again. Sophia and Emma do their homework at the kitchen table. Carolina and I cook dinner together every night, the two of us working side by side the way we used to when she was growing up. We talk, we cry, we laugh, we make plans. Carolina files for divorce. Marco contests it, tries to drag it out, but Patricia handles everything. And slowly, painfully, the legal machinery grinds forward. One evening in December, about 6 weeks after the hearing, Carolina and I are sitting at the kitchen table after the girls have gone to bed, and she says, "I never thanked Dad properly for protecting you, for protecting us. He loved you so much, both of you." I know, and I let Marco make me forget that. I let him convince me that Dad's way of doing things was old-fashioned, that holding on to this house was sentimental and impractical. But Dad was right. This house isn't just an asset, it's home. It's where we remember who we are. Your father would be proud of you, for having the courage to leave, for choosing yourself and the girls. I should have chosen you sooner. You chose me when it counted. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, and then Carolina says, I got a job offer today. Teaching assistant at the elementary school. It's not much money, but it's a start. And with my degree, I can work toward my teaching credential, maybe have a real career again. That's wonderful. I found an apartment too. Small, just 2 bedrooms, but it's affordable, and it's in a good school district for the girls. We can move in at the first of the month. I feel a pang at the thought of them leaving, but I know they need their own space, their own fresh start. I'm going to miss having you here. We're only going to be 15 minutes away, and we'll be here for Sunday dinners, every Sunday. That's non-negotiable. I smile. Deal. That night, lying in bed, I think about the past 3 months, about how close I came to losing everything, and about how one moment of courage, one decision to finally stand up for myself, changed the trajectory of all our lives. The house is quiet around me, but it's not empty. It's full of memories, full of love, full of the echoes of everyone who's lived and laughed and cried within these walls. Luis is here. Carolina is here. Sophia and Emma are here. I'm here. And I'm not useless. I'm not a burden. I'm a woman who built a life, who raised a family, who survived loss and betrayal and came out stronger on the other side. The weeks turn into months. Carolina and the girls move into their apartment, and true to her word, they come every Sunday for dinner. I make mole and rice, and we sit around the kitchen table, and we talk about their weeks, about school and work, and the small victories and frustrations of daily life. Sophia tells me about joining the debate team. Emma shows me a drawing she made in art class. Carolina talks about her students, about the joy of being back in a classroom, about feeling like herself again for the first time in years. Marco becomes a ghost in our story, someone who exists in the background but no longer has power. The divorce is finalized in March. Carolina gets primary custody of the girls. Marco gets weekend visitation, but Sophia and Emma don't always want to go, and Carolina doesn't force them. I hear through the family grapevine that Marco lost his house to foreclosure, that he's living in a condo now, working for someone else instead of running his own business, and part of me feels sorry for him because no one should have to face that kind of financial ruin. But then I remember his voice calling me useless, remember the way he looked at my home like it was his to take, and the sympathy fades. In April, I get a phone call from the bank. The woman on the other end is professional but friendly, and she says, Mrs. Santos, I'm calling about your credit card balance. We've noticed you've been making consistent payments, and we'd like to offer you a lower interest rate and a structured payment plan that could help you pay off the balance faster. It's not a miracle. It's not a dramatic rescue. It's just a practical solution offered by a person doing her job, but it feels like a gift. I accept the terms, and suddenly, the debt that felt like a boulder on my chest becomes manageable, something I can tackle with a clear plan and a reasonable timeline. By summer, I've paid off half of it. By Christmas, it's gone completely. I'm not rich. I'm not even comfortable in the way Marco would define it, but I'm stable. I'm secure. I'm free. On a Thursday evening in January, exactly 1 year after Marco called me a useless old woman, I'm standing in my kitchen making dinner. The terracotta walls have a fresh coat of paint, courtesy of a weekend project Carolina and I did together in the fall. The leaky faucet has been fixed. The gutters have been repaired. The house is still old, still imperfect, but it's maintained and loved and cared for. There's a knock at the door. I wipe my hands on a towel and open it, and Marco is standing there. He looks different, thinner, older. There's a humility in his posture that wasn't there before. Mrs. Santos, he says, and it's strange hearing him call me that instead of Carmen. Can I talk to you for a minute? I consider saying no, closing the door in his face, but curiosity wins out. Okay. We stand on the porch. I don't invite him inside. I wanted to apologize, he says, and he won't quite meet my eyes. For everything. For the way I treated you. For the things I said. For trying to take your home. I was desperate and scared, and I convinced myself that what I was doing was for the good of the family. But I was wrong. I was cruel. And I'm sorry. I study his face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I see is exhaustion and regret. Thank you for saying that, I tell him. I appreciate it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see now what I did, and I'm trying to be better. For Sophia and Emma, if nothing else. How are you doing? I heard about the house. I'm managing. It's been hard, but I'm figuring it out. Working for someone else is humbling, but it's also a relief in some ways. Less pressure, less risk. I'm learning to live within my means, which is something I should have done a long time ago. And Carolina? She's doing great. Better without me, probably. She's happier. The girls are happier. I see that now. We stand in silence for a moment, and then he says, "Your house looks good. You did a nice job with the paint. Carolina helped. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her." Marco nods. I should go. Thank you for listening to me. And again, I'm sorry for all of it. He walks back to his car, and I watch him drive away, and I feel something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe a lessening of the anger, a softening of the hard edges. I go back inside and finish making dinner. Carolina and the girls are coming over, and Sophia has a big debate competition tomorrow that she wants to talk through. And Emma wants to show me a new dance she learned in her after-school program. And Carolina wants my advice on a difficult parent-teacher conference she has coming up. Life is ordinary and beautiful and full of small moments that matter more than money or property or status. At dinner, I tell them about Marco's visit, and Carolina's face goes through several emotions before settling on something that looks like relief. "How did that feel?" she asks, hearing him apologize. "Strange, but good, I think. It doesn't change what happened, but it closes something." "Are you going to forgive him?" "I don't know. Maybe someday. But I don't have to decide that tonight." "No," Carolina agrees. "You don't." After they leave, I sit in my living room with a cup of tea, and I look around at this house that almost wasn't mine anymore. And I think about all the people who tried to tell me who I was and what I could handle and what I deserved. They were wrong. All of them. I'm not useless. I'm a woman who survived the death of her husband and the betrayal of her family and the systematic erosion of her self-worth, and I came out the other side intact. I'm not a burden. I'm the keeper of memories and stories and the legacy of a life built with love and intention. I'm not too old or too weak or too anything. I'm exactly who I need to be, and this house is exactly where I belong. In the drawer of the table beside me, there's an envelope. Inside is a letter I found last week while cleaning out a closet, something Luis wrote to me years ago, before he got sick. Just a random love note he left for me to find. It says, "Carmen, thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for making our house a home. Thank you for being the strongest person I know. I read it whenever I need a reminder of who I am and what I'm capable of. Tonight, I don't need to read it. Tonight, I know." The house settles around me, and I finish my tea, and I turn off the lights, and I go upstairs to bed, and I sleep the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who knows that they fought for what mattered and won. There will be other challenges. Life doesn't stop handing out tests just because you pass one. But I've learned that I can face them, that I have the strength and the resources and the stubbornness to protect myself and the people I love. And if anyone ever tries to call me useless again, if anyone ever tries to make me feel small or insignificant or like I'm in the way, I'll remember this year. I'll remember standing in that courtroom. I'll remember Carolina crying in my arms. I'll remember the look on Marco's face when he realized he'd lost. I'll remember that I am Carmen Santos, and I am not someone who can be pushed aside or talked over or erased. This is my house. This is my story, and I'm not done living it yet. If this story has touched your heart, subscribe now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. That helps us keep sharing stories of strong women, families, and the unexpected turns of life.